Hi, everybody. It's Friday evening. I just had to come on and talk about this extraordinarily depressing and dangerous spectacle of Pete Hegseth in front of a congressional committee. It felt like some casting call for a rush chairman who was up in front of a disciplinary committee for setting trash cans on fire or hazing. I mean, Hegseth, you just look at him and he looks panicked, scared, over his head, sweaty. You know, I bet the guy went home and had a nice big drink after that. And, you know, this is just so unnecessary. And you can blame Donald Trump, but you can blame Donald Trump for a lot of things. But we have a system that doesn't depend just on one person. And Roger Wicker, whom I've known for years, our dads were friends. I helped elect Roger Wicker. I think he's a very serious person who spent probably more focus in his career on building alliances abroad and strengthening America's position in the world than any other single issue. And he confirmed Pete Hegseth. And that didn't have to happen. I don't think Roger Wicker literally would have let Pete Hegseth cut his lawn. I mean, would you? This weird, drunken guy with tattoos, with this thing about women, you want this guy around the house? No. And what Roger Wicker could have done, he could have called up Donald Trump and said, look, Mr. President, there's 317 million Americans. You don't even have to be an American to be defense secretary. There's a lot of good conservatives who actually are not ridiculous figures. Nominate someone else. And Trump would have done it. And Wicker didn't. And, you know, it's just so sad. Someone like Wicker, who has had this career as we were both pages in Washington. Then he worked for a congressman. Then he was a congressman. Then he was a senator. He's appointed after Trent Lott resigned by Haley Barbour, and then elected, where I worked in that campaign, which was really his only tough race. He ran against a former governor of Mississippi. This is what he's going to be remembered for. And I know he doesn't see it that way because he's surrounded by all these aides that say he's great and these people, yeah, you're great. No. This is it. You have proven to be arguably, and I don't know really how you would say this isn't true, the worst chairman of the Armed Services Committee in modern history. Because what has happened to the military under his watch? Hegseth has gone in and he's fired more generals than a dozen secretaries of defense combined. He's clearly on some sort of purity jihad, firing more women and African Americans. Disproportionate percentage of them are getting fired, even though they are a underrepresented group in the military at the highest levels. And he's an idiot. And this is the guy at a time when the largest land war in Europe is brutally being fought, at a time when Russia helped elect a president, and now Hegseth has completely sided with Putin, as has Trump, has the Republican Party. And I don't think you can argue that the Republican Party has not been compromised by Russia. It's something that's been going on for a long time, actually. And we kind of looked the other way when I worked in the party, kind of didn't think about it that much. Mitt Romney, to his eternal credit, went out in 2012 and called Russia our major geopolitical foe. He was attacked by Democrats, which I get. That's what you do in a campaign. for wanting the Cold War back. You know, foreign policy in the 80s is called. They've since, I think most of them regretted that or admitted that they were wrong. But the dirty little secret is inside the Romney campaign, Republicans were calling and saying, what are you doing? China is our number one threat. Why are you talking about Russia? They didn't go out and say that publicly because it's a team sport. But Romney said this because he believed it to be true, and he's proven to be incredibly prescient. This was before Crimea, before they helped elect a president, before they had a full-scale invasion and this war of genocide. And I think Roger Wicker is someone who cares deeply about Ukraine. I mean, if you listen to him talk about it, it's clearly coming from his heart. And yet, he confirms Pete Hegseth and goes out and will give a speech about it. It's as if he thinks that his role is like an editorial writer. If I just state my opinion, I'll have done my duty. I don't know, but you know, it's going to be studied for a long time that how this happened. For decades, the beating heart of the strongest opposition to the Soviet Union and the expansive Russian Federation was the most conservative element of the Republican Party. And now that's the beating heart of the pro-Putin movement in American politics. And I wrote about this last week. Just, you know, I was in Berlin the weekend, or toward the end of the week when the wall came down. It was extraordinary. I mean, it was a moment like people were crying and hugging each other. There's a sense that history wasn't inevitable. It was extraordinarily joyful. And that was 880 days after Ronald Reagan gave a speech, Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. So if you looked at these images coming out of Budapest, the night that Orban went down, it so reminded me of that weekend when the Berlin Wall came down. And yet this time an American vice president, who Roger Wicker supported, is there campaigning for the Russian client. This is as if nothing like this has happened. It's as if Churchill's party decided, or Churchill decided, no, actually we're pro-Nazi. And it's a complete moral collapse of a party. And it's extraordinarily dangerous. This war in Iran, which has depleted Americans' military, has put America in a much more vulnerable, dangerous position than we were before. And it didn't have to be this way. And constitutionally, senators have a role to play. And in our system, Republican parties have a role to play, sort of a circuit breaker role. And Republicans never pulled the circuit breaker on Trump. And now this is playing out. And the saddest thing is, yesterday was Donald Trump's best day. Tomorrow it'll be worse. And the day after that, it'll be worse. And Republicans are just going along with it. You know, I made so many commercials for Republicans where we evoked these patriotic symbols and this patriotic ethos. I don't think you can be a patriot and vote for Pete Hegseth. I don't. And that's why I ended up calling this book I wrote about the Republican Party, It Was All a Lie, because I don't think people abandon deeply held beliefs in a few years. It just means you didn't deeply hold them. So here we are. The only way to fight this, is to have at the ballot box. Why is this happening? It's happening because Trump and Republicans won elections. And the only way we're going to undo it is by the same way they did in Hungary, by voting in very large numbers, because it's clear Republicans are doing everything they can to curate the vote. And no one has ever changed, in the history of sports, changed the rules of the game for a game they were winning. And that's what Republicans are trying to do because they know they're losing. So I think what happened in Hungary was very hopeful. I think it could play an extraordinary role in how the rest of the century plays out. Because if it frees up $90 billion to go to Ukraine to frozen Russian assets, that will be the equivalent of like D-Day, a moment to change history. And we have to go out and we have to do everything we can to defeat these Republicans. And you know, I spent years of my life pointing out flaws in the Democratic Party. I was really good at it. I helped elect more Republicans, governors and senators as a media consultant than anybody else out there. But when you look back at the things that we were arguing about then, they seem so trivial. You know, Joe Trippi, who I think is probably, you know, certainly at the very top of the Democratic consultants of his generation, sort of reinvented American politics with the Howard Dean campaign. Joe and I used to go against each other in races. I hated going against Joe. He was so good. But we look back at what we were arguing over. It's like, should the capital gains tax be 32 or 28%? It's like, really? We made ads about that? When now we have a country where one party has completely abandoned its role of fealty to the Constitution and their oath? So pain is the only teacher in politics. So we have to stay focused, we have to work hard, and we have to believe. Because if they can do it in Hungary when every odds were stacked against them, when the opposition couldn't really buy television time, when the opposition was limited where they could put posters up, where the opposition was limited where they could have rallies and still win, we have no excuse. So thanks for joining. Keep hopeful, keep working. Better days ahead. Thanks for joining.